Well, I'm sure it was an interesting discussion time you guys had. You know, it's pretty important to find out where everybody is as you're getting to know each other on the team and the culture of the team itself. Like, which one of you say, "Oh, the word good enough is just not good enough for me," or the ones of you who said, I think I've had some losses that kind of blew off. So I hope you're using it not only for your training, because you need it for your training, but also for your relationships here, because this will really help to accelerate what we're trying to do in TLP. So part 2, why leaders must deal with negative reality. Well, letter A is really obvious, because they're reality and they are the leader's burden. I studied kind of the masters of leadership. I've just done it all my career because they have so much to offer. And a guy named Max Dupree, great leader, great writer, said the first responsibility of the leader is to define reality. In other words, when a leader takes over a team or a company or a business or a church, before they go into all the solutions, they've got to say, here's what is. Here's the strengths here. Here's the weaknesses here. Here's the home runs. Here's the absolute failures. And here are the people. And here's our resources. And here's our mandate and our mission and our strategy. Reality is where the leader needs to live. And you may have been around a leader that did not like to deal with negative realities. And it's very, very difficult. I was dealing with a leader one time, and I was contracting with him for a service, and I wasn't happy with the service, and I had a tough breakfast with him. I said, you're not providing. I mean, I like you, I like who you are, your people, but you're not providing what I really contracted to provide. And I'm having a real difficult time here in this relationship, and I want to solve it. And I kind of went on for a couple of minutes. I wasn't mean, but kind of pretty firm. And he stopped and he said, let me ask you a question. I said, sure. He said, can you tell me what we're doing right? And I remember thinking, it's over. It's over. And in time, it was over. The relationship did end. And I thought to myself a million times, and I've been on the other end of that conversation, and if somebody says that to me, and you would know this right now, what would any of you say? You'd say, well, what do we do to make it better? Or what are the issues here? How can we improve this? But he wanted me to sort of sugarcoat all the positive things he was doing. I thought, he's not defining reality. He's wanting to hear all the affirmations and praises, and I'm sorry, leadership can't live there forever. So it's the job of the leader to be familiar with and embrace and define reality. The second one, the negative will not be ignored. If you have a finance problem, a cash flow problem, a culture problem, a market problem, an inventory problem, and you just go, well, I'll let it sit and I'll let it go away, and then it'll get better over time. Think about cancer and how it metastasizes if you don't do anything with it. And the same is true in business, and the same is true in organizations. What you do not notice and what you do not pay attention to will not get better over time. I mean, think about, the last time you went on vacation and maybe you or your spouse, forgot to clean out the refrigerator of that broccoli in there and the vegetable crisper. And so then you go away and you come back from this great trip and you open the door and you think, oh my gosh, have we created life in here? What's that smell? And you open it up and, oh my goodness, you need the hazmat mask and all that stuff because the negative got better. That broccoli didn't create, another species. That broccoli didn't solve, world hunger. That broccoli got worse because it will not be ignored. So you have to learn how to deal with reality because it won't get better over time. Don't stick your head in the sand. And my mantra for negative realities, if you want to get my dumb it down version, nip it in the bud, nip it in the bud, nip it in the bud. Right? Maybe one of your assignments this month, for next month, is going to be, I've been ignoring a negative reality in my people or a conversation that I've been avoiding. I'm kicking the can down the road. Stop it. Nip it in the bud. We'll help you. Your director will help you. Your team will help you because it will not get better over time. Next part is cultural issues. And what I mean by cultural issues is that, there's a lot out there about culture. I study culture a lot. And one model says that there's a culture of fear and a culture of openness. And a culture of fear is when people are afraid to talk about the negatives because the boss might say, well, that's just kind of like, you're being demoralizing or you're not really being positive with us. And the person's just saying, well, we got a problem with, money or, the sales is not working or the office isn't organized. And the culture of openness praises people and says, Thank you for bringing that up. We need more good commendations like you or good statements like you. So do you want a culture of openness or fear? If you're Mr. or Ms. Positive all the time, you're going to have people who are afraid around you, and they won't tell you the truth. And you want to praise the people that tell you the hard realities. I'm not talking about being complaining all the time and being ungrateful. I don't mean that. But people are willing to say, this is a problem. And the third part is called obstacles in the gap. And what I want to talk about here is, this is more of the internal part that leaders kind of have to live with, is that here's what we do when we face these negative realities. I'm going to draw you, Sally or Sam leader, right? There is the ideal self, and this is the me that I would like to be one day. Sometimes you might call it the aspirational self, but the person I would like to be. Loving and good power and effective and mission-driven and high values and all the things we aspire to be. Sort of like that passage back in Philippians 3 that I quoted. And then there's the real self. And guess what? The real self is me, the way and the way we are and the way I am and the way you are. We got some good stuff, but we also have failure. We have family of origin issues. We have mistakes we've made, sins we've done, that sort of thing. And so we're not ideal. Ever since the fall in Genesis 3, we're not ideal. And so there's this gap. And that gap is disruptive. It's not fun. It is painful to experience that gap. I don't like knowing that no matter how hard I try, today I will not be up here. You get in your car, you get in your plane and go home for TLP, you will not be here. And that's kind of painful for us to experience because we're all sort of perfectionistic. Getting back to that, right? So humankind has figured out a way to get away from this painful, disruptive feeling of the gap. And we have these strategies we go to. Actually, they're more tactics than strategies. First one is we deny that there's a gap. I don't have a gap. I am ideal. Aren't you lucky to be around me? And we didn't talk about it because it's, we're just sort of like happy all the time. Have you ever had a lunch with somebody like this who doesn't have a gap? It's a long lunch. When you're trying to open up and be vulnerable and real and authentic and talk about failures and struggles and challenges, and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry you're having a hard time because my marriage is perfect and so are my kids and they got great teeth and they don't need braces and I'm making all this money and give to the church. And you think, when can I get out of here? Will somebody page me, please, so I can have an excuse to leave here? That's hard. Well, fortunately, and God did this, denial only works for forever with a small percentage of the population. Sooner or later, reality comes around. God in His love brings reality around, like confrontation and loss of things and loss of money and loss of friends and loss of health and loss of mental health. And most of us kind of break from reality, break from denial, and it doesn't work. There's a percentage that does, and they are miserable, sad people. You don't want to be one of those, but it gives up. So then when I can't deny that there's a gap anymore and pretend like it's all happy, then I move to the second tactic, which is willpower. And willpower is, I'm just going to try harder. Darn it, I'm going to start, looking at my dashboard and being more effective and having my quiet time and working out in the morning. I'm just going to try harder. Well, here's what the research says about willpower. Guess what everybody does on New Year's Day? We make a New Year's resolution. And what do? I'm going to eat less. I'm going to, be nicer to my spouse, be more present with my children, have more quiet times, work out more, whatever. And willpower is fine, but it's really overrated because what happens to a New Year's resolution? I've looked up the research. It lasts about 3 weeks. Now, out of 52 weeks, that's less than 10% here. So before January is up, this is given up. So the willpower doesn't bring me up here either. So then what all of us high-performing leaders do, right, is we go into the next part is what I call self-judgment. I just beat the tar out of myself. And I say things like, you're a loser, you're letting everybody down. Are you serious about leadership? Are you serious about the place you are? Are you serious about your faith? And we just kind of take the lash, right, and just hit ourselves in the back, self-flagellation with the judge. All those horrible negative self-talk we do to each other, just beat ourselves up. Guess what we found out about this? It works on a short-term basis. There's maybe for 2 or 3, maybe 6 months. It won't last 6 months, I don't think. Maybe 2 or 3 months, you'll kind of like get up earlier and you'll be better and you'll try harder and you'll be more focused and more disciplined. But sooner or later, the way we are, the mule just lies down in the middle of the road and says, shoot me. Just put me out of my misery. I can't keep up with this. The judge never fixed anybody. And if you're into willpower and self-judgment, you probably are kind of tired right now because you and I weren't created by God to live this way. This is really what the law is about. And the law was, as the Bible says, was an imperfect tutor. We're supposed to live somewhere else, which is the place of grace and truth. We'll get to that in a second. I can't deny it. I can't willpower my way. I can't beat myself up into this. So what do I do next? I move into the land of despair. Shoot me. And I just give up and I think I'll never get there. I'll never be as smart, as effective, as loving, as kind, as organized as I'd like to be. Forget it. And this is when bad stuff happens, like middle-aged crazies, where I go buy the wrong car and gold chain around my necklace, gold necklace chain around my neck. If you've got one on right now, I'm not judging anybody. I'm just saying there's a stereotype. And, the marriage starts suffering, people start acting out impulsively and that sort of thing. Despair. Here's the funny thing. Despair is the best of these. You know why? Because God is on the other side of despair, saying, I've been waiting for you. I've been waiting for you to find my answers. I'm glad that you have gotten through these three because these are not getting you anywhere. I'm on the other side of despair when you reach out your hands and say, I've got no answers. And we're going to talk about the very last one there, and I'm going to give you a hint for it. It's forgiveness, grace, and grief. Forgiveness and grace and grief. And God's there helping you to be forgiven for the mistakes you've made, to find grace so you've got energy, and grieving the past and the losses. That's where we're going. I'm going to do an entire workout of what grief means for the high-performing leader. And it's probably some stuff that you haven't done because I hadn't done it before I studied this stuff. I have now. So here's your discussion question. Look at this gap here again. Where do you get stuck? Where do you tend to land when you have a loss? Something happens that's beyond you and you're not happy with things. Find out where you're stuck. It's going to be a very rich conversation. My experience, this will be one of the most robust conversations you may have for this whole entire year at TLP. So you guys talk about it. We'll get right back.